At 7:58 on a Tuesday morning, every production supervisor at Ardent Sterile Systems got the same email. Subject line: Immediate certificate suspension notice. By 8:11, 3 packaging lines had stopped cold. By 8:24, the warehouse manager was on the phone with their 2 largest medical device clients explaining why outgoing shipments had just been placed on hold. And by 8:37, the CFO who'd cut Priya Raman's salary by 40% the day before was standing in the quality office asking the kind of question people only ask when they already know the answer. How bad is this? Nobody answered him right away. Because hanging on the wall behind him, where the company's framed ISO 13485 certificate had been for 6 years, was an empty rectangle of cleaner paint. Priya had taken her copy when she left. Hey Tangled Yarns family, it's Brett. And if you're new here, welcome to the story of how a man with a spreadsheet learned the difference between overhead and the entire reason you're allowed to operate. This is the story of Priya Raman, a quality systems director at a medical packaging company who spent 10 years building the compliance structure that held the entire business together. And when a new CFO decided she was too expensive and cut her salary by 40%, she didn't yell. Didn't bargain. Didn't beg. She smiled. She resigned. And then she revoked the only ISO authority that company had ever bothered to put in one person's name. Let's untangle this. Priya Raman joined Ardent Sterile Systems in 2014 when the company was small enough that half the systems lived in binders and the other half lived in someone's memory. Ardent manufactured sterile barrier packaging for medical device companies. If you've ever had surgery and the instrument tray came perfectly sealed, it came from a company like Ardent. This is not the kind of industry where you can wing it. Everything has to be documented. Every process. Every material lot. Every deviation. Every corrective action. And if you want serious clients in the medtech world, you need ISO 13485 certification. Without it, the biggest buyers won't touch you. Priya came in as a quality engineer with a master's in biomedical systems and an almost irritating level of organization. Within 6 months, she had rebuilt their document control system. Within 2 years, she was leading the internal audit program. By 2018, Ardent had won its first major long-term contract with a surgical device manufacturer. Then another. Then a diagnostics company in Germany. The company grew fast. And every single time, Priya's work was the reason clients felt safe signing. She was the one who sat through the registrar audits. She was the one who answered when clients sent 83-question supplier quality packets at 6 p.m. and wanted them back by morning. By 2023, Ardent was doing $260 million in annual revenue. About 72% of that came from customers whose contracts specifically required active ISO 13485 certification. Priya's title was now Director of Quality and Regulatory Systems. She was making $205,000 a year. Which sounds like a lot until you realize she was personally carrying the compliance framework behind more than $180 million in business. And here's the part that matters. Ardent's ISO program wasn't just built by Priya. It was built around her. She was the named management representative on file with the registrar. She was the only active ISO 13485 lead auditor credential holder employed at the company. She was the authorized signatory on the last 2 surveillance audits. More importantly, her employment agreement had a professional credentials clause. It stated that any personal certifications maintained by Priya Raman remained her sole property and could not be used by Ardent after termination of employment without her express written consent. At the time, it made perfect sense. Priya had already worked one job where a company used her credentials for months after she left. Her attorney made sure that would never happen again. So the clause went in. Everybody signed it. Then everybody forgot it existed. In January 2024, Ardent was acquired by a private equity-backed manufacturing group. New board. New reporting structure. New obsession with efficiency. And a new CFO. His name was Grant Holloway. Grant came from industrial logistics. He was one of those polished cost-cutting executives who uses phrases like human capital rationalization with a completely straight face. He saw every department in terms of margin contribution. Quality, in his mind, was a cost center with a lab coat. He spent 6 weeks asking managers to justify headcount and salary bands. Priya knew exactly what kind of person he was the first time he asked her why Ardent needed both preventive action tracking and corrective action tracking. When somebody thinks a regulated quality management system is just a fancy spreadsheet, you are not speaking the same language. Still, Priya tried. She gave him risk maps, client requirement summaries, audit histories, revenue tied to regulated contracts. She laid it out clearly: quality was not support at Ardent. Quality was product access. Without certification, the company didn't just slow down. It stopped. Grant smiled through all of it and kept asking about labor cost. 2 weeks later, he called Priya into a meeting with HR. Grant had a folder. HR had that careful face people wear when they know what's happening is ugly. Grant folded his hands and said, "Priya, we've completed a compensation benchmarking exercise, and your current package is materially above market for this function." This function. Not your work. Not the regulatory backbone of the business. This function. He slid a revised compensation letter across the table. Base salary reduction from $205,000 to $123,000. 40%. Grant kept talking. "We see quality as a shared operational responsibility, not a premium executive function. This brings your role in line with where the business is headed." Priya looked up. "You're cutting the salary of the person listed as management representative on your ISO certificate by 40%. Grant gave a little shrug. Titles and historic arrangements don't always reflect current market value. "Do you understand that I'm the only active lead auditor on file for our system? We can cross-train someone. You can't cross-train someone into a registrar file and 12 years of institutional memory by next payroll." Grant didn't blink. "We're not debating the adjustment, Priya. This is the revised package. If it doesn't work for you, we can discuss transition timing." Priya sat back. Took one breath. Then she smiled. Not a big smile. Just the kind that makes people nervous because it means they expected pain and got composure instead. "Okay," she said. Grant blinked. "Okay? Okay. I won't be accepting the revised package. I'm resigning effective immediately." Grant actually looked relieved. He thought he'd won. He thought the expensive problem had voluntarily removed itself. He stood up, offered his hand, and said, "I think that's probably best for everyone." Priya shook it. "Maybe," she said. Then she went back to her office and began the kind of afternoon that changes a company forever. First, she documented her resignation formally. To HR, the COO, legal, and the external registrar contact. Second, she pulled up her employment contract and the professional credentials clause. Third, she drafted a separate notice to the registrar. It stated that as of that date, she was no longer employed by Ardent, was no longer serving as management representative, and withdrew authorization for Ardent to rely on or represent her personal ISO-led auditor credential in any current or pending certification matter. She further noted that the open corrective action responses submitted after the last audit contained attestations prepared under her authority, which she could no longer support. Then she attached the relevant contract language. And sent it. Let me translate what that email meant. It meant, the company just lost the only person officially tied to the quality system in a way the registrar recognized, and the paperwork already in motion may no longer be valid. That is not a small inconvenience. That is an audit fire. Priya spent the rest of the afternoon removing her personal certificate copies and turning over company property. No scene. No speeches. Just order. At 5:12 p.m., she drove home. At 6:03 p.m., the registrar replied. They acknowledged receipt of her notice and requested Ardent provide, within 1 business day, an updated management representative designation, evidence of qualified internal audit authority, and confirmation that open responses remained valid. Priya read the email while sitting at her kitchen table with takeout Thai food and almost laughed. Because she knew the answer to all 3 requests: no. No. And absolutely not. Ardent's leadership didn't. Not yet. The reply from Ardent didn't go out until the next morning because Grant had ignored the registrar email at first. By the time legal saw it, Priya was already gone, her access was shut off, and nobody could answer basic questions like which Kappa items were still open, who had authority to close them, or who maintained the supplier deviation log. At 11:40 a.m., Ardent sent the registrar a confident but flimsy response naming the operations excellence manager as interim quality representative. The problem was, he did not hold the lead auditor qualification. He had never led a surveillance audit. And under questioning, he admitted he was still being brought up to speed. That phrase might as well have been gasoline. By end of day, the registrar placed Ardent's certification under immediate suspension pending emergency review. At 7:58 the next morning, the official notice hit inboxes. And that is where we began. Production stopped because Ardent's largest medical device clients had automated supplier controls. If an ISO certificate changed from active to suspended, purchase orders froze. No debate. No grace period. Red means stop. One client paused $4.8 million in outgoing weekly volume before lunch. Another triggered a mandatory supplier risk review. A third sent a single sentence, advise when certification is restored, all shipments on hold. Grant, the CFO who'd cut Priya's salary to save about $82,000 a year, was now staring at a same-week exposure north of $9 million. By noon he was calling her. Priya let it ring out. Then he emailed. Priya, there seems to have been some misunderstanding regarding the registrar communication. We'd appreciate your immediate assistance. Misunderstanding. That word alone deserved a medal. Priya waited 3 hours before replying. There is no misunderstanding. I resigned after declining a 40% salary reduction. Under Section 9 of my employment agreement, Ardent may not use my personal credentials after termination without written consent. I notified the registrar accordingly. Grant called again. Then legal. Then the COO. By the second day, Ardent offered to reinstate her full salary. Priya declined. By day 3, they offered a 10% raise over her prior compensation. She declined that too. Here's why. Because once a company shows you exactly how it values you, going back for slightly more money isn't victory. It's just renting yourself back to people who already told you they'd cut you the second they thought they could. Priya wasn't interested in going back as an employee. But she was open to consulting. Her attorney sent the proposal on Friday. Independent consulting agreement. 12-week minimum term. $650 an hour. Retainer paid monthly in advance. Minimum 120 hours per month. Full discretion over scope. No use of her credentials beyond explicitly defined certification recovery activities. And one more thing. A written acknowledgement from Grant Holloway that the compensation reduction had been a management error resulting in material business disruption. Not because Priya needed an apology. Because she wanted it in writing. Ardent fought the number for 48 hours. Then one of their top 5 clients sent formal notice that if certification was not restored within 30 days, they would begin dual sourcing permanently. That client alone represented $46 million a year. Suddenly $650 an hour looked cheap. Ardent signed. Priya started the following Monday as an external consultant. Not from her old office. From a glass conference room with a visitor badge clipped to her blazer like a tiny, expensive joke. The first thing she did was make a list. Everything that had to be fixed before the registrar would even consider lifting the suspension. Internal Audit Authority reassignment. Competency evidence. Retraining records. Supplier approval traceability. Open Kappa closure. Management review reissue. By the time she finished, the COO was staring at it like it was a ransom note. How long? He asked. If everyone does exactly what I tell them, 6 weeks to get the registrar back on site. Maybe 8 before full restoration. Grant, sitting across from her with a face like spoiled milk, said, that long? Priya looked at him evenly. You cut 40% off the one role holding this together. Recovery doesn't happen at spreadsheet speed. For 6 weeks, Priya ran Ardent without working for Ardent. She rebuilt the audit package. Trained the interim rep, closed the nonconformities. Reconstructed missing evidence. And every single hour, every single invoice, reminded them exactly what too expensive had cost. The registrar returned in late June for a special audit. 2 full days on site. Priya wasn't the auditee anymore. She sat at the back as external recovery support. At 4:16 p.m. on the second day, the lead auditor closed her folder and said the words everyone had been waiting for. Pending final review, we are prepared to recommend reinstatement. The room exhaled. Ardent's certificate was restored the following week. But the damage was already done. 3 clients had partially moved volume elsewhere during the suspension. 1 never came back fully. A German diagnostics manufacturer downgraded Ardent from preferred to conditional supplier for 12 months. Between lost revenue, audit costs, consulting fees, chargebacks, premium freight, and idle line time, the total internal estimate of the salary optimization event landed just north of $27 million. All to save $82,000 a year. Grant lasted another 4 months. Officially, he left to pursue other opportunities. Unofficially, the board needed someone to blame. Priya, meanwhile, had options. Word travels in regulated industries. Within a month of the Ardent engagement ending, Priya had 3 offers. She accepted one from a competitor in North Carolina. Vice President of Quality Systems. Base salary $290,000. Equity. Budget authority. And direct reporting access to the CEO instead of through finance. On her first day, the CEO said something so simple it almost sounded fictional. "We don't see quality as overhead here. We see it as market access." Priya laughed and said, "Good. Because I'm allergic to people who think ISO is just a framed certificate." By 2026, she'd helped that company land 2 major orthopedic device contracts and expand into European distribution. Her equity was worth more than $3 million on paper. And Ardent? They survived. But not cleanly. The client they lost permanently went to Priya's new employer. Which is exactly the kind of ending I like. Not because it's cruel. Because it's symmetrical. The company that cut the person protecting its credibility ended up paying for her twice, once in consulting fees, and once in lost business to the company smart enough to hire her properly. Let's talk about what actually happened here, because this story is not just about a salary cut. It's about a mistake executives make over and over in technical and regulated businesses. They think value lives in the visible parts of the machine. Sales closes the deal. Ops runs the line. Finance counts the money. So when they look at quality, compliance, regulatory, documentation, all the stuff that doesn't look glamorous, they see cost. But in industries like medical manufacturing, quality isn't support. Quality is permission. Permission to produce. Permission to ship. Permission to exist in the market at all. Grant looked at Priya and saw a salary that felt too high. What he didn't see was that her job was not to make money directly. Her job was to make sure the company was legally and operationally allowed to keep making money. That's a very different thing. And when you cut the wrong person because you don't understand the system they're holding together, the system teaches you. Violently. Also, Priya didn't sabotage anything. She didn't falsify records. She didn't hide documents. She simply withdrew permission for a company to keep using professional credentials that belonged to her after they chose not to keep employing her. That is not revenge in the reckless sense. That is boundary enforcement with excellent documentation. And honestly, more people should learn from it. Alright, Tangled Yarns family, your turn. Have you ever worked in a role where leadership treated compliance, quality, or documentation like useless overhead, right up until the second it blew up in their face? Or have you ever watched somebody cut the one person holding a critical certification or process together? Drop your stories below. Because the boring jobs always have the wildest consequences when someone stupid gets involved. If this one hit that sweet spot for you, hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't already, because we've got new stories every single day. And remember, if the person protecting your certification looks expensive, maybe ask what it costs when they're gone before you open Excel and get brave. I'm Brett. This is Tangled Yarns. And that yarn? Officially untangled. See you tomorrow.